Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 70a, top of the page, with the words Hi, Nami, typically, V'chelev Nevelo. The Gemara challenges, according to this logic, one can also derive the halacha that the forbidden fat of the carcass of a non-kosher animal is impure from the verse, and the fat of the carcass and the fat of a treifa may be used for any other service, Leviticus 7:24, which teaches that such forbidden fat is ritually pure. Mishi sofer mishum bal tochal chela nevelo. Yotzazo she'en isura mishum bal tochal chela nevela ela mishum tamei. The continuation of the verse, but you shall in no way eat of it, indicates that the verse renders pure only fat that is forbidden, specifically due to the prohibition of you shall not eat the forbidden fat of the carcass, meaning the forbidden fat of kosher animals. This serves to exclude this forbidden fat of a non-kosher animal, which is not forbidden due to the prohibition of you shall not eat the forbidden fat of the carcass, but rather due to the prohibition against eating a non-kosher animal. Since the verse that states that fats are ritually pure is referring only to kosher animals, the forbidden fat of a carcass of a non-kosher animal must be impure. Rav Shezevi's derivation of this halacha from the word trefa is therefore superfluous. Hai trefa viboye eliasoye chayo sol kedai techamino. Rather, this word treifa is necessary to include the forbidden fat of the carcass of the kosher undomesticated animal to teach that it is ritually pure, as it might enter your mind to say that only the forbidden fat of carcasses of those animals whose fat is forbidden and whose meat is permitted if slaughtered, meaning a kosher domesticated animals, is ritually pure, and this serves to exclude this forbidden fat of carcasses of those animals whose fat and meat are both permitted if slaughtered, meaning kosher undomesticated animals whose fat is impure. To counter this possibility, the word treifa teaches us that the fat of a carcass of any animal that can become a treifa is ritually pure, including the fat of kosher undomesticated animals. Amar le, ma'ishna tmea de'ein chelbo chaluk mibsoro chaya nami ein chelbo chaluk mibsoro ve'od hakasiv ve'achol lo yitachluhu. He said to him, if it is derived from the verse that the forbidden fat of a carcass of a kosher undomesticated animal is pure, what is different about a non-kosher animal that would cause its forbidden fat to be impure? If the difference is that its fat is not distinct from its meat, as both forbidden for consumption, the fat of a kosher undomesticated animal is also not distinct from its meat, as both are permitted. And furthermore, isn't it written later in the verse, but you shall in no way eat of it? Leviticus 7:24. This phrase is interpreted in 70b as excluding the fat of undomesticated animals, teaching that it is impure. Amar Abaye, trefa l'gufei tzarich sh'otom rahoyol t'mei asur michayim u'trefa asur michayim ma'tmei achel tamei. Rather, Abaye said, the word treifa in this verse was necessary for its own sake to teach that the forbidden fat of a carcass of a treifa of a kosher domesticated animal is pure. The inclusion of the word teaches that you should not say that since a non-kosher animal is forbidden while still alive and a treifa is forbidden while still alive, therefore, just as the forbidden fat of a non-kosher animal is impure, so too the forbidden fat of a treifa is impure. The word treifa therefore teaches that it is pure. Ihachi Hai nami mi baish lo toma, vai oif tome aso bachilo. Utreva sura bachilo, ma oif tome eno tame, av treva eno metame. The Gemara asks, but if so, meaning if one could have learned the halacha of the forbidden fat of a treifa from the halacha of the forbidden fat of a non-kosher animal, then this word treifa in the verse concerning the impurity of a kosher bird carcass, Leviticus 17:15, is also necessary for its own sake, to teach that the carcass of a kosher bird that is a treifa is impure. It is necessary for this to be written with regards to the carcass of a kosher bird, so that you should not say as follows: since a non-kosher bird is forbidden for consumption, and a treifa is forbidden for consumption, therefore, just as a non-kosher bird does not impart impurity, so too a treifa does not impart impurity. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the word is necessary to include the slaughtered kosher bird that is a treifa, not a carcass. And furthermore, is it possible to derive the halacha concerning a treifa from that concerning a non-kosher animal, as suggested? These two cases are incomparable, as a non-kosher animal never had a kosher period before being forbidden, whereas a treifa had a kosher period before becoming a treifa. And if you'd say, what can be said with regard to an animal that is a treifa from the womb, which never had a kosher period? In any event, there are kosher animals among its species, meaning that the treifa is a member of a kosher species, which cannot be said of a non-kosher animal. Ela amarava, ela amarava, ela amarava. Okay. Ela amarava. HaTorah Amar Yavo Isur Nevela Yachol Al Isur Chelev Yavo Isur Treifa Yachol Al Isur Chelev. Rather, Rava said the word treifa in the verse concerning forbidden fat, Leviticus 7:24, teaches a different halacha by stating, "But you shall in no way eat of it," referring to the forbidden fat of a carcass. The Torah states, "Let the prohibition of eating a carcass come and take effect where the prohibition of eating forbidden fat already exists. One who eats the forbidden fat of a carcass is liable both for eating forbidden fat and for eating from a carcass." Likewise, the word treifa in the verse teaches, "Let the prohibition of eating a treifa come and take effect where the prohibition of eating forbidden fat already exists, so that one who eats the forbidden fat of a treifa is liable for transgressing two prohibitions." אבל טרייפה אם לא יש מן טרייפה משום לאיסור מחיים, אבל נבלה אם לא צריכה. And both the word carcass and the word treifa are necessary, even though they teach similar halachot, as had the verse taught us about additional liability only with regard to the forbidden fat of a carcass. One might have thought that it applies to only a carcass, as it imparts ritual impurity. But with regard to a treifa, which does not, one might say that the additional liability does not apply. And had the verse taught us this halacha only with regard to a treifa, one might have thought that it applies to it only to a treifa, as its prohibition takes effect while it is still alive. But with regard to a carcass, which becomes forbidden only when it dies, one might say that it does not apply. Both words are therefore necessary. Rab Meir, hai treifa mai avid le mivoile le ma'ut eshchita shehi ifnim. The Gemara has established that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the word treifa in the verse concerning the impurity of a kosher bird carcass, Leviticus 17:15, teaches that a slaughtered bird that is a treifa imparts ritual impurity. The Gemara asks, and what does Rabbi Meir, who holds that a slaughtered bird that is a treifa does not impart ritual impurity, do with this word treifa? The Gemara answers, it is necessary to exclude the slaughter of non-sacred birds that occurs inside the temple courtyard, teaching that it does not cause them to impart ritual impurity as would a carcass, even though they are forbidden for consumption. Rabbi Yehuda, Treifa Achmeni Ksiv. And how does Rabbi Yehuda derive this halacha? The Gemara answers another instance of the word treifa is written concerning the ritual impurity of birds. A carcass or a treifa he shall not eat to become impure with it. Leviticus 22 verse 8. Rabbi Yehuda derives the halacha from this verse. Rabbi Meir chal lute shchita shehi lifnim v'chal lute of tameh. And how does Rabbi Meir interpret the appearance of the word treifa in both cases? The Gemara answers what is necessary to exclude slaughter that occurs inside the temple courtyard, as mentioned above, and what is necessary to exclude a non-kosher bird, to teach that the carcass of a non-kosher bird does not impart ritual impurity. Rabbi Yehuda midvela nafkalei. And how does Rabbi Yehuda derive that the carcass of a non-kosher bird does not impart ritual impurity? The Gemara answers he derives it from the word carcass in the verse. A carcass, a treifa, and he shall not eat to become impure with it, Leviticus 22 verse 8, which indicates that only carcasses of birds that are forbidden for consumption due to their status as a carcass are impure. Non-kosher birds are forbidden due to their non-kosher status, not due to their status as a carcass. And we're asked, and what does Rabbi Meir do with this word carcass? The answers, since the verse mentions eating, Rabbi Meir holds that the word carcass is written to teach that the minimum measure of consumption of the meat of a bird carcass that renders one impure is an olive bulk, which is the standard legal measure of consumption for Torah laws in general. But typically, the Gemara challenges, but let him derive this measure from the first verse. And every soul that eats a carcass shall be impure. Leviticus 17:15. From the fact that the merciful one expresses this halacha using the language of consumption. The Gemara responds, both verses are necessary, one to indicate the measure of consumption that renders one impure is in olive bulk, and one to indicate that the maximum measure of time for consumption of the olive bulk is the time it takes to eat a half loaf of bread. One who takes longer than this standard measure of time will not contract impurity. It is necessary for the Torah to indicate that this latter halacha as well, as otherwise it might enter your mind to say, since the impurity of carcasses of birds is a novelty, as one contracts it by eating rather than by touching or carrying, perhaps its halachot are unusually stringent, and even one who eats an olive bulk in more than the time it takes to eat a half loaf of bread should also contract impurity. Therefore, the verse teaches us otherwise. The Gemara cites a braita concerning the impurity of the forbidden fat of a carcass. The sages taught when the verse and the fat of a carcass and the fat of a treifa may be used for any other service. Leviticus 7:24 teaches that such fat is pure. The verse speaks of the forbidden fat of a kosher animal. The writer challenges, do you say that the verse speaks of the forbidden fat of a kosher animal? Perhaps does it only speak of the forbidden fat of a non-kosher animal? Amart tiher michal shchuta v'tiher michal chelev mashi tiher michal shchuta v'toira lo behema af yeshitir michal chelev v'toira lo betmeya. You may say in response, the Torah renders a slaughtered animal pure for the impurity of the carcass due to the fact that it was ritually slaughtered, and likewise the Torah renders the forbidden fat of a carcass pure due to the fact that it is forbidden fat. Therefore, the two cases are comparable, just as when the Torah renders a slaughtered animal pure due to the fact that it was slaughtered, it is referring only to a kosher animal and not to a non-kosher animal, which is impure, even when ritually slaughtered. So too, when the Torah renders forbidden fat pure due to the fact that it is forbidden fat, is referring only to a kosher animal and not to a non-kosher animal. Kalech l'derech zo tiyem miklal nevela v'tiyem miklal chelev ma shetiyem miklal nevela b'tmei avlo b'toila af kishetiyem miklal chelev b'tmei avlo b'toila. The Brisa challenges, or perhaps go this way, maintain that since the Torah renders the carcass of a non-kosher animal ritually pure, removing it from the category of a carcass, and likewise the Torah renders the forbidden fat of the carcass pure, due to the fact that it is forbidden fat. Therefore, the two cases are comparable. Just as when the Torah renders the carcass of a non-kosher animal pure, removing it from the category of a carcass, it is referring only to a non-kosher animal and not to a kosher animal, the carcass of which imparts impurity. So too, when the Torah renders forbidden fat pure due to the fact that it is forbidden fat, it is referring only to a non-kosher animal and not to a kosher bird. Okay, we'll stop here.